Support comes from
Entergy provides much more than power. We support science and engineering at local schools to build a brighter path to better jobs and help prepare the next generation. Because together, we power life. Entergy.
additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.
Eat 3 squares a day, right? That's the dogma for a long time.
What mice can teach us about dieting.
It's a lot more complicated than red versus blue or left versus right, which is one reason our politics can be so infuriating.
The polarization of American politics.
Most of my life, I didn't think that was popular thought, so I tried to hide it.
The 3 life missions that move human rights icon James Meredith. Hi, everyone. I'm Andre Morrow. Thanks for joining us for this week's edition of SWI. Much more on those top stories in a moment. But first, let's check on some of the other headlines making news across Louisiana. A warning from the state legislature's nonpartisan chief economist about that $300 million plus surplus for the budget year that ended this June. Economist Greg Albrecht told a meeting of the state's higher education board that the economy has shown modest improvement, but he doesn't expect others to recommend a boost in this year's projected revenue. The surplus is excess cash remaining from the budget year. It's tied to better than expected personal income and corporate tax collections, though sales tax revenues came in slightly lower than projected. An overhaul of federal disaster policies, including provisions directly affecting homeowners and local governments hit by the 2016 Louisiana floods, easily cleared the U.S. House of Representatives on Wednesday. The changes were included in a largely unrelated bill reauthorizing the Federal Aviation Administration and other federal transportation programs. Among the provisions are changes to federal law that would allow flooded homeowners who took out Small Business Administration loans to also receive federally funded recovery grants. If a final vote doesn't happen this weekend, a short-term extension is expected to buy some time. The Restore Louisiana Homeowner Assistance Program application deadline is upon us. It's Monday, October 1st. This applies to about 3,000 homeowners who took the initial survey and were invited to complete an application but have not yet done so. Those eligible should work with their case manager to make sure it's done correctly and before the deadline. Go to restore.la.gov for more information. Interstate 10 widening and help for roads and bridges highlighted Sean Wilson's address to the Baton Rouge Rotary Club this week. The DOTD secretary says though the state has many more projects than money to pay for them, they're trying to maximize the use of matching federal dollars wherever possible. Though interstate expansion projects steal most of the headlines, Wilson says repairing the state's bridges remain priority number 1.
We're going to take care of the things that we've already built. I will also tell you we're going to take care of the 12,000 bridges in the state of Louisiana. Because you can have a great road with a bad bridge, that beautiful monument that you're going to be bringing to Baton Rouge won't get in here on just good roads. It's going to cross a large number of bridges, and we have to address those. I have bridges that are 50, 60, and 70 years old still in operation.
For University High School Lab School in Baton Rouge, it was go big or go home. You see, they set their sights on the iconic James Meredith as the subject of their PBS NewsHour Student Reporting Lab story. They were one of the schools nationwide selected for this. Tonight, LPB works as a partner in this project, watching the students learn how to make TV news. They asked, he accepted. And now the U-High Cub community is surrounded with living history and covering it as a news story right on their campus. The school is hosting 85-year-old James Meredith, who 56 years ago stood firm in his quest for racial equality and became the first African American to enroll at Ole Miss. At the time, the segregated university had no intention of watching him enroll. Mississippi Governor Ross Barnett defied a court order and physically blocked Meredith, preventing him from entering the school. That episode in American history remains one of the country's biggest ever news events, so it's a tall order for a band of newbie journalists to tell that story. Talk about your ultimate teaching moment.
You have the rare opportunity to bring history, a major historical figure, right into your school.
No, it's very exciting.
Jennifer Bevel teaches informational technology and is instructor in charge of this project. Just over a month ago, the class expanded its scope to include digital and multimedia production. In other words, learning how and actually producing TV news.
Because the kids being involved with doing a production on him, they're so into the actual historical aspect and the impact today. So it's such a whole meaningful experience, and they really are getting it, that how important he is.
Keep in mind, the class is in its infancy. But this team of youngsters is determined to tell the story of James Meredith and his visit to UHI and the impact it's had. One of the first items was actually welcoming their guest to the school and getting him settled before one of his talks to the student body. They had to listen to his talk as a journalist would and take photographs and also shoot B-roll, video.
I've learned how to interview people, how to conduct an interview. I've learned how to edit interviews. I've learned how to work a camera, how to set up a microphone, things that I wouldn't normally be open to until my college course.
They find it so important, and it is such a big deal that they're really putting a lot into learning every aspect of it and doing the best job they can.
A basic part of that process was learning everything about Meredith himself, because they weren't really aware of him.
So something like the civil rights movement, which was decades even earlier, it's really difficult to teach them something so abstract, especially when for them they see integrated environments.
The 85-year-old Meredith has long worn the label of civil rights icon, but it's a label he rejects. His desire to enroll at Ole Miss was his way of exercising his constitutional rights as an American. Meredith told me he always felt that God called him to take the courageous path he took.
I've always thought that there were three missions. One mission was to break the system of white supremacy. That's what Ole Miss was about. The second mission was to expose and challenge the all-pervasive fear that kept blacks following the rules of white supremacy.
I love Mississippi. I love her people.
Governor Barnett used the occasion of this 1962 Ole Miss football game in Jackson to address a packed stadium. His words whipped the crowd into a frenzy, and Confederate flags waved wildly. What was not known by the Memorial Stadium crowd was the deal already struck by Barnett with President John Kennedy to allow the 29-year-old Meredith to enroll the next morning, a Sunday. Meredith was to arrive early before most students had even returned to campus. Still, the town of Oxford erupted. It took some 30,000 U.S. troops, federal marshals, and National Guardsmen to get James Meredith to class as a deadly riot ensued. Before Meredith addressed students for a second time in 2 days, media students made sure everything was just right for their all-important one-on-one interview with him.
They've raised their own standards and their own expectations. The research that they've done in the writing portion, the journalism portion, knowing that they're going to be sitting face to face with Mr. Meredith, they've really made sure that they've put everything into it.
In the half-century since his days as an Ole Miss student, Meredith tells me the years right up to present day have helped shape what he calls his third mission in life.
The last mission was to raise the moral character of Christians, particularly black Christians.
This summer, Ole Miss announced it would induct Meredith and 6 others into its Alumni Hall of Fame. That from the university that fought to deny him his right to an education. His life remains active, and he says if he sees a wrong, he'll want to make it right. The equality of mankind is a biggie he's working on.
How far away do we need to go for that to happen?
The ending of Civil War and slaves being freed did not change the issue of one group having a privilege beyond another group. That's all the woman issue has ever been about. That's all the same-sex marriage issue has ever been about. Although everybody try to define it as if it's different. It is not different. It's the same. Equality of man, or the lack of it.
It was a pleasure to meet James Meredith. Thank you, sir. You know, during one of his talks to students, one youngster asked him who he was rooting for in Saturday's LSU Ole Miss football game. He thought about it, and then he said things really in support of each school. In the end, though, he remained neutral, saying it was time to stop talking. Now we take a modern-day look at American politics, which can swing far left or far right. There's a divide so wide, politics is often off the table at family gatherings. A forum this week at LSU's Manship School gave some facts and some figures and clarity. Democracy expert Mike Wagner led the talk, and LPB was there.
If I say the marginal tax rate should top out at 40% and you say no, 30%, we can compromise maybe if we're people of good humor at 35%. But if you say a fetus is a person and I say no it isn't, where do we compromise?
The challenge of compromise in present-day American politics is a piece of the discussion democracy expert Mike Wagner presented to a packed house at the LSU Manship School of Journalism this week. Wagner is a professor, researcher, and author who studies what lies beyond the left-right divide in our country, the political polarization within American politics.
This divide, thinking left versus right, tends to work for our elites because our elected Democrats are liberal on economic issues and liberal on social issues. And our elected Republicans are conservative on economic issues and conservative on social issues. Human beings who are not elected officials tend not to organize their attitudes in that same way, or at least there's a lot more diversity with respect to how those of us who live and work outside of being an elected official organize our attitude. People don't really organize their ideas in that way. People have liberal views on some issues and conservative views on others and moderate views on others, and part of what we're trying to point out in our research is that it's a lot more complicated than red versus blue or left versus right, which is one reason our politics can be so infuriating. We've got two choices between our major parties and a wide variety of ways that people organize their ideas.
Wagner says people form their views, ideas, and opinions depending on where they get their information.
Whether they get them from mainstream news sources, from more partisan news sources, from not the news but their friends or social media, and depending upon where people get their information, depending upon how they organize their own attitudes, they seem to engage in politics differently. They tend to be more or less extreme. They tend to be more or less participatory and more or less confident about what things might be like in the future.
The polarization of beliefs and opinions can also turn what could be a simple conversation about current events instead into a battleground where lines in the sand are drawn. Who wants to ruin Thanksgiving dinner or even a night out with friends?
Decades of public opinion research show that we shouldn't be terribly confident in what the average person knows about a wide variety of issues. And that in some ways makes sense. Most people don't need to know a lot about a lot of different things to make reasonable choices when they vote. But it's also the case that the electorate is not well informed about a lot of issues, and now we're kind of differentially informed. We might pick our favorite source and believe facts from that source, but not from another source, and it becomes much more difficult for us as a society to agree on these things are true, and therefore we should think about what decisions to make next based on this set of facts. We tend not to have that same this set of facts that we might have shared in a different era.
What we're experiencing present day, Wagner says, actually has some similarities to long ago.
I think it's pretty unique in terms of how fast things go and in terms of how easy it is to share. It's similar to kind of the dawn of the newspaper era, when there would be Republican and Democratic newspapers and they would just be upfront about that, which is sort of similar to some of the cable news we see and some of the web-based news we see. And we've always shared stories socially. It's just now that we can do that with everybody on Facebook or Twitter or some other device, where we're kind of stuck with those we could see in eras past. I think everybody who comes to a talk like this cares about the country and has their own set of ideas about what might make it better, and I think benefit from hearing from what research has to say, but also benefiting from just what each other has to say. And I find that a lot of times liberals and conservatives in the audience realize they have more in common than they might have thought coming into that conversation.
As you came here today, you may have had some ideas about what you might hear. What do you leave with?
So today I mostly leave with kind of like a reaffirmation of the fact that these conversations matter, and that
we are polarized.
We are polarized, and that this is all, it's definitely a long process that we're gonna see continue to evolve, in the years to come. But I leave being content that I was born when I was born, and that I am this age, and that I'm existing right now, and here to experience all of this, good or bad.
If you observe the political discourse, there's definitely high levels of polarization. I mean, I think I wouldn't want to fall into a sort of false equivocation of, well, it's everybody's fault equally. I mean, I definitely think there's, blame to go around in specific instances where it's gotten worse. But we definitely polarize, and I think we all have a hand in sort of making it better.
It was just over a year ago, Governor John Bel Edwards signed historic criminal justice reform into law. Those measures have already saved the state more than $12 million, but not everyone's singing the praises. Some, led by high-profile Republicans, are questioning if public safety is in jeopardy with some prisoners released. They're also asking if ex-offenders are getting the proper training for their re-entry into society. Louisiana Public Square explored this issue this month. Here's a clip from Wednesday night's broadcast.
Crime rates have been going down all across the country. They were going down in Louisiana before we did this, and they will continue to go down unless other factors change. This is not the but-for on reducing crime rate. I think the success of this program is going to be judged on whether these releases increase the danger to public safety. And we're going to know that later on, because quite frankly, a recidivist, a reoffender, in real cost to local government, retrying, to victimization, and to communities, it costs about 7 times what it costs to house a prisoner for a year. About 7 times, okay? That's in an Illinois study. Now, Illinois may be more expensive than us, but even if it's 3 times, it's frightening. And I think after 3 years, if we reinvest, like Jimmy says, if we reinvest and we do it right, I think we can keep people from recidivating. At least we can keep it to a minimum, and then there'll be room for expansion. But if this thing blows up, it's going to be hard to expand on it. It really will be.
The notion of there being some kind of blow up or disaster, I really don't think that is the way to characterize what we're experiencing. And I'm glad you're hopeful about that. But I think what we really want to think about is we've all been sold a bill of goods. We've all been told that an eye for an eye is the way that our society should run. We've all been told that if you simply remove someone from society and you put them, you lock them away, that will make us safe. And that is not true. What the research has shown is that when you lock someone up and you throw away the key and you do a strategic disinvestment from them, 95% of those people are coming home. And those people came home, and those people hurt other people. And so when we put services in place, when we put counseling in place, when we put the kinds of opportunities in place for people, that's what diminishes that.
I'd like to mention whenever I was 15 years old, I went to prison. And there may be some people in this room that would have said I was the worst of the worst and wouldn't be able to turn my life around. Luckily, I received a lot of opportunities while I was incarcerated to rehabilitate myself, to educate myself. I turned my life around. I'm not an exception to the rule. I'm an example of what can happen when there's good policy in place and where there's an opportunity for change and an opportunity for second chances.
Are any of you worried that the politics of the upcoming governor's race and some of the candidates who may potentially be running for governor who are very much opposed to these reforms are going to slow it down or cause the legislature to even back off? Or do you think that you can sustain these?
Oh, I don't think there's any question we can sustain it. I'm
politically.
Well, I mean, politically it needs to be done, and I think the governor understands that, and we have to move forward with this. This is, and as Pete said, they put green cards on all 10 pieces of this legislation. The DA's
the green card is
I'm for this legislation. Right. They could have sat out and not done anything or been against,
right.
But they put a green card in, and look, that. I think the bipartisanship here it should go away.
The partisanship.
The partisanship. Yeah, it's so. I'm not into politics really, but I can tell you that our state has a good thing moving forward with this criminal justice reform, and I don't know how another candidate can argue this point. I mean, they just need to read the stats and sit down with us and let us help them understand. The criticism that I've never met either one of those individuals. They've never talked to me or called me or wanted to talk about it. If they do, let's have a discussion. Let's sit down and talk about it, and let's explain what we're trying to do.
Revisiting Reform re-airs this Sunday at noon. You can visit lpb.org/public square for more program details. There's a new study. It shows it might be not what you eat, but when you eat that's most important for healthy living, at least in mice. That's according to research from national groups conducted in part by a scientist here in Louisiana. Now, LPB's Kelly Spires spoke with Don Ingram of the Pennington Biomedical Research Center and brings back this report. Kelly?
I asked Ingram what he found and what it might mean for what we humans should be eating.
Eat 3 squares a day, right? That's the dogma for a long time.
But according to Dr. Ingram's research, those 3 meals spaced out throughout the day could be slowing your metabolism.
What did you find?
The study showed that mice on 2 very different diets, one had a higher fat and lower protein and a higher sucrose content, which we thought was going to be detrimental to their longevity versus a more balanced diet. That the diet composition did not impact their survival at all.
Ingram was a co-investigator on a study that started out comparing these 2 diets. But when they divided mice on each diet into 3 groups, they found something else. The first group of mice had access to as much food as they wanted when they wanted. It's called an ad libitum diet, Latin for at one's pleasure. The next were fed once a day and were given 30% less calories than the first group. The third group were fed the same amount as the first group, called a pair-fed diet, but ate once a day instead of throughout the day.
They knew this was all they were going to get for that day. They would eat it within a time period of, say, 3 to 7 hours. So that meant they were without food for the remainder of the day, say 2/3 of the day. You could monitor this in a metabolic chamber and see that the mice on the restricted diet and the pair-fed diet showed this increase in carbohydrate metabolism, and when food wasn't available, you go and start metabolizing fats. Whereas the control ad libitum fed animals just didn't change their metabolism at all because food is available. So it's this stress on the metabolic system that keeps it sort of conditioned. And so that the bottom line was the diets of different composition, but mice eating basically the same amount of calories, that the composition of the diet didn't matter. What mattered was the length of the fasting time that the mice were provided on these diets.
How did your findings fit in with what we already know about nutrition?
The base of the study began, nearly over 30 years ago with a long-term study of calorie restriction in monkeys. And we weren't looking as an application to human aging. We were just using it as a tool to manipulate aging. Aging is complex. It's got many different processes involved, many different genes involved. But it's profound, at least in shorter lived animal models like rats and mice, that when you restrict the diet 30 or 40%, you get this increase in their longevity of 30 to 40%. And it's not only they live longer, they have less disease, they function better, they look better.
What does this study mean for how humans eat?
Ingram says studies have started at Pennington to see if humans can stand to go without food longer than they're used to.
There weren't many negative reports from the participants. You know, so I can do this. But of course, many long-term studies, even done here at Pennington, has shown compliance long-term of dieting, everyday dieting, is very difficult, very difficult. So scientists began to think of other ways. Are there other regimens of diet restriction? Are there pharmaceuticals, or are there nutraceuticals that can mimic the effects of calorie restriction?
Can you tell me what is the next step in this field of research?
Many years ago, we published a study that said, okay, maybe we don't have to restrict the mice every day. What if they had restricted every other day? But that meant fasting every other day. So they had all they wanted to eat on Monday, and then they had nothing to eat on Tuesday, Wednesday eat, Thursday not eat. And we found that was equally effective as restricting every day. And there was a epidemiological literature on fasting. And then the question became, well, does it have to be every other day, or can it be 2 or 3 days a week? Can it be a few days a month? And this is where the field is right now in terms of how many days of fasting. And then came along, again, this concept that was reinforced in the current study, which is, well, what if we just fasted some portion of the day? Rather than 3 meals a day, what if we restricted our caloric consumption down to a few hours a day? And there have been studies, again, here at Pennington, a recently published study by Dr. Ravison's group that's shown that 1 meal a day, again, just looking at biomarkers of disease risk, indicate that is feasible, people can do it, and it does reduce disease risk parameters.
Thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome.
Kelly, thanks for that report. Hey, that's our show for this week. Remember, you can watch LPB on demand on your phone or tablet with our LPB Anywhere app. Please follow us also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For everyone at Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Andre Morrow. Thanks for watching. Until next time, that's the state we're in.
Support comes from
Entergy provides much more than power. We support science and engineering at local schools to build a brighter path to better jobs and help prepare the next generation. Because together, we power life. Entergy.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.